The merchant vessel Twilight Meridian moved slowly through the empty darkness of the galactic rim. Something was very wrong with the ship. Its metal walls made terrible groaning sounds every time computer systems tried to restart themselves. Inside the command bridge, Captain Thesic stood watching the screens that showed all the ship's problems. She was a tall Valorian, and her skin looked like crystal that caught the red emergency lights and threw them around the room in worried patterns. "Another malfunction, Captain," said her first officer. His voice shook with fear. "The gravity stabilizers in Deck 7 just stopped working. That is the 4th time this week." Captain Thesic's 3-finger hands closed into tight fists. For the past 6 months, her ship had been falling apart piece by piece. The worst part was not knowing why. She had hired 3 different engineering teams to fix the problems. All 3 teams had quit their jobs and left the ship. They all said the same strange thing. They said the ship was cursed. The engineers told stories that made no sense. They heard whispers coming from inside the walls when no one was there. They saw shadows moving the corners, even when there was no light to make shadows. Tools disappeared from their hands and showed up later in places that were impossible to reach. One engineer swore he saw his wrench floating in the air before it vanished completely. Captain Thesic did not believe in curses or ghosts or magic. She believed in science and engineering and logical explanations, but she was running out of choices. Her crew was terrified. Half of them wanted to abandon ship at the next station. The other half were too scared to even go near the lower decks anymore. "Contact the human station," she finally said. The words felt heavy in her mouth. Her first officer's eyes grew wide with surprise. "A human, Captain? But they are known for their strange methods. They do not follow proper procedures." "That is exactly what we need right now," Captain Thesic replied. "Someone who thinks differently." 2 days later, a small transport shuttle docked with the Twilight Meridian. A human man stepped off carrying nothing but an old metal toolbox. His name was Tae-young, and he did not look impressed by anything he saw. He was about 40 years old with dark hair tied back and hands that were stained with grease and oil. He had spent 20 years fixing broken ships all across 4 different sectors of space. He had heard every kind of ghost story and superstition that scare crews could imagine. "So you think your ship is haunted?" Tae-young asked when he met Captain Thesic in the docking bay. His voice was flat and uninterested. The Valorian captain stood up straighter. "I think my ship is having malfunctions that do not follow any normal engineering patterns." Tae-young made a grunt sound in his throat. "That is the same thing every crew tells me when they forget to do basic maintenance work." He lifted his toolbox onto his shoulder. "Show me what you have." As Tae-young walked through the corridors of the ship, he noticed how the crew looked at him. There were Valorians with their crystal skin, Carthosians with their multiple arms, and even a few Drenali with their scale faces. All of them watched him walk past like he was going to his death. Their eyes followed him with fear and pity. Tae-young had worked on stranger ships than this. He was not worried. For 3 whole days, Tae-young took apart the ship's systems piece by piece. He checked every power line that carried electricity through the walls. He recalibrated the navigation system that guided the ship through space. He even rewired the entire environmental control system that kept everyone breathing good air. Everything he checked seemed to be working perfectly. The technology was very advanced, much better than anything humans had built, but it was all within normal working parameters. And yet the malfunctions kept happening. Lights flickered. Doors opened and closed by themselves. Temperature controls failed in random rooms. On the 4th day, Tae-young noticed something interesting. He pulled up maps of the ship on his portable computer and marked every location where something had gone wrong. When he looked at all the marks together, he saw a pattern. Every single malfunction happened near the oldest part of the ship. Everything centered around the original cargo hold that had been built first, with the rest of the vessel constructed around it later. "What is down there?" Tae-young asked Captain Thesic. He pointed to the sealed lower decks on his screen. The captain's crystal skin flickered with colors that showed her unease. "That section is restricted. No one goes there." "Why not?" "Because that is where it started. The first whispers we heard. The first shadows we saw." Tae-young picked up his toolbox. Then that is where I need to go to fix your problem. The crew will not allow it, Captain Thesick warned him. They are too frightened. Tae-young looked at her with steady eyes. The crew does not pay me. You do. I am going down there. The lower decks of the ship were very dark and extremely cold. Tae-young climbed down the metal ladder carefully. The light on his head was the only thing pushing back the darkness around him. His toolbox hit against his side with each step down, making clinking sounds that echoed in the empty space. The air smelled strange down here. It had a metallic smell like old coins, but there was something else mixed in, something that reminded him of living things, like rotting plants or old meat. The smell made his skin feel uncomfortable. Probably just mold growing somewhere, Tae-young said out loud to himself. His voice sounded small in the vast, empty space. When he finally reached the bottom of the ladder, he found himself standing in the cargo hold. The room was absolutely massive, much bigger than it looked on the ship's maps. The walls curved in a strange way that did not match the rest of the ship's design. It was like this room had been built by completely different people, using completely different ideas about how ships should look. Tae-young moved his headlamp slowly across the darkness. The beam of light traveled across the curved walls, until suddenly it landed on something that made him freeze in place. There in the exact center of the cargo hold was a huge round structure. It was shaped like a perfect sphere, and it was enormous, at least 10 meters across. The surface of the sphere was covered in patterns that glowed with a soft light. The light pulsed slowly like a heartbeat, getting brighter and then dimmer in a steady rhythm. What the hell is that? Tae-young whispered. He walked toward it slowly, pulling out his engineering scanner from his toolkit. The small device started beeping frantically as soon as he turned it on. The numbers and readings on its screen made absolutely no sense. According to the scanner, the sphere was not just a machine made of metal and circuits. It was also partly alive. There was biological tissue mixed together with crystalline computer parts and metal tubes. The scanner showed organic cells living right next to electronic components, all working together as one system. Tae-young had been fixing ships for 20 years. He had seen technology from dozens of different alien species, but he had never seen anything like this before. Nothing that was both machine and living creature at the same time. He pulled out his portable computer and opened the ship's construction records. His fingers moved quickly across the screen as he searched through old files and documents. What he found made his heart beat faster. According to the records, the Twilight Meridian had not been built normally. Instead, it had been constructed around salvage technology. The builders had found pieces of an ancient derelict ship floating in deep space, a ship that was millions of years old, from a civilization that existed long before any current species had even learned to make fire. They built this whole ship around this one thing, Tae-young said quietly. He stared at the glowing sphere with new understanding. The sphere pulsed again. This time the light was brighter, and the patterns on its surface moved faster. It almost seemed like the sphere was responding to his presence, like it knew he was standing there looking at it. Behind Tae-young, one of the wall panels suddenly exploded. Sparks flew everywhere, and pieces of hot metal scattered across the floor. He spun around in surprise, then turned back to look at the sphere. The glowing patterns were going crazy now, flashing and moving in chaotic ways. The steady pulse had become wild and unpredictable. Okay, Tae-young said, trying to stay calm. He set his toolbox down on the floor. Let me figure out what you were trying to tell me. He moved closer to the sphere and ran his hands carefully across its surface. He was looking for access points or control panels, anything that would let him interact with it properly. The material felt warm under his fingers, almost exactly the same temperature as human skin. That was strange because machines were usually either hot from running or cold from being turned off. This felt alive. His fingers found a small depression in the surface. It was shaped almost like a handprint, but larger than a human hand. Instead of 5 fingers, this handprint had 6. At that exact moment, the entire ship shuddered violently. The gravity system failed completely. For one terrifying second, Tae-young floated up off the floor. Then the gravity snapped back on with tremendous force, slamming him down to his knees. Pain shot through his legs. The sphere was flickering wildly now, its light becoming dimmer with each pulse. The ship was dying, and this sphere was dying with it. And when it died completely, everyone on board would die too. Tae-young had only seconds to make a choice. He could run back up the ladder and try to evacuate the ship, or he could try something desperate. He pressed his human hand firmly into the six-finger depression. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The sphere exploded with brilliant light that filled the entire cargo hold. Tendrils of pure energy shot out from the surface and wrapped around his arm. They felt like electricity and fire and ice all at the same time. Tae-young tried to pull his hand away, but he could not move. The connection had already formed and it was too late to break it. Information began flooding into his mind. It came too fast and there was too much of it. He saw images and heard sounds and felt emotions that were not his own. He saw the beings who had built this technology, a civilization so incredibly advanced that they had learned how to merge their consciousness directly with their machines. He saw their entire empire spreading across thousands of stars. Then he saw their fall, watched as a terrible darkness consumed their worlds one by one. A darkness that moved between dimensions like a hunter stalking prey. He saw their final desperate act. They built ships like this one, arc ships designed to carry knowledge across millions of years. The ships would wait in silence until they found someone compatible enough to understand their message, someone flexible enough to use the technology, someone stubborn enough to never give up even when things seemed impossible, someone human. The light began to fade. Tae-young's legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the cold floor. His mind was still reeling from everything he had seen and felt. The last thing he noticed before darkness took him was that the sphere had stopped its wild pulsing. Now it glowed with a steady, healthy rhythm, and the whispers that had haunted the ship for months were finally forming into words that he could understand. "Thank you for listening," the voice said inside his head. Then everything went black, and Tae-young knew nothing more. Tae-young opened his eyes 3 days later in the ship's medical bay. His head hurt terribly, like someone had hit him with a heavy metal tool. His right arm felt strange, tingling with energy that still moved through it like small electric shocks. When he looked around, he saw Captain Thesic standing at the foot of his bed. Her crystal skin showed patterns of worry and concern. "What did you do down there?" she asked. Her voice was quiet but intense. Tae-young sat up slowly in the bed. Every movement made his head hurt more, and he had to stop and wince from the pain. "I fixed your ship," he said simply. "Fixed it?" The captain's voice rose with emotion. "Our systems are now operating at 130% efficiency. That should be impossible. Our sensors can now see 10 times farther into space than before. And our chief engineer came to me this morning saying he can understand the ship's systems perfectly now, as if he has always known them his entire life." She leaned forward, her crystal face close to his. "That is not a simple repair. You have transformed this entire vessel." Tae-young touched his temple with his fingers. Inside his head, he could still feel information swirling around at the edges of his thoughts. New knowledge that had not been there before. The core in the cargo hold is not a power generator like everyone thought. It is something called a precursor intelligence. It is semi-sentient technology, which means it is partly alive and partly machine. It was designed millions of years ago to bond with a navigator, someone who can connect with it directly and control it. "And you are this navigator?" Captain Thesic asked. "Apparently so." Tae-young swung his legs carefully off the bed, testing whether he could stand. Everything felt different now. Sharper, more connected. He could sense the ship all around him, even though he could not see through the walls. He felt its systems running smoothly, understood its structure without looking at maps, and could even sense the emotional states of the crew members through how they interacted with the ship's technology. The malfunctions were never a curse. The ship was trying to communicate. It was searching for someone compatible, someone who could understand it. "Compatible in what way?" the captain asked. "Humans are adaptable," Tae-young explained as he stood up slowly. "We improvise when things go wrong. We do not give up when something seems impossible. We find new ways to solve problems." He looked down at his hands and saw faint patterns of light dancing just beneath his skin. It was residue from his connection to the sphere. The precursors who built this technology designed it to work with species that could think flexibly. Most species in the galaxy follow rigid protocols and rules. They do things the same way every time. But humans, we break the rules when we need to. We try things that should not work. And sometimes they do work. Over the next week, Tae-young learned how to control his new connection to the ship. He discovered he could access computer systems just by thinking about them. He did not need to touch keyboards or screens anymore. He could understand alien languages by recognizing patterns in how the words were structured, and he could communicate directly with the ship's consciousness, the vast ancient presence that called itself the Keeper. The Keeper showed him memories from millions of years ago. He saw images of precursors, the ancient civilization that had built the Ark ships. They had been wise and powerful, but they had also been terrified. They had foreseen a great catastrophe coming, something they called the Silence. It was a pattern-eating entity that devoured entire civilizations. The Silence traveled between dimensions, moving from one reality to another. It consumed all electromagnetic life and all technology, leaving nothing behind but empty dead space. The precursors knew they could not defeat the Silence. So instead, they built Ark ships like the Twilight Meridian. These vessels could hide in dormancy for millions of years, sleeping silently until the right navigator came along to wake them up. Inside each Ark ship was preserved knowledge, weapons, and technology that future civilizations might use to survive. Why did you wake up now? Tae-young asked the presence in his mind. Why after all these millions of years? The answer that came back filled him with cold fear. Because the Silence has returned. Tae-young felt ice run through his veins. He quickly accessed the ship's long-range sensors, which were now far more powerful than before thanks to his connection. He began searching the outer rim of known space for anything unusual. What he found made his blood turn cold in his body. 3 colonies had gone completely dark in just the past week. There had been no distress signals sent out, no debris floating in space, no evidence of battles or explosions. Just nothing. Empty space where bustling space stations full of people had been only days before. Show me, Tae-young commanded the Keeper. The ship's sensors focused on the most recent disappearance. It was a mining colony on the edge of a system called Andera. Through the enhanced sensor feed that only Tae-young could access, he saw something that should not exist. There was a void in space, an area darker than the normal blackness of space. It seemed to devour light itself, swallowing any radiation or energy that came near it. And it was moving slowly but steadily toward the center of the galaxy, toward all the populated worlds where billions of people lived. Captain Thesic came to stand beside him on the bridge. She looked at the sensor readings, and her crystal face became grave and serious. The Galactic Council has been saying these disappearances are just pirate raids or natural stellar phenomena. Random bad luck. They are wrong, Tae-young said firmly. His hands moved across the controls as he analyzed the void's composition and movement. This thing exists partially outside our dimension. It is feeding on the quantum signatures of technology and living beings. It eats the fundamental energy that makes things real. Can we stop it? The captain asked. I do not know yet, Tae-young admitted, but I know people who need to be warned immediately. He turned to face Captain Thesic directly. We need to reach the Galactic Council right now. We have to make them understand the danger before it is too late. The journey to the capital world, called Viridium Prime, took 6 days. Normally, this trip would take 12 days, but the Meridian could now move much faster thanks to its enhanced systems. During the entire journey, Tae-young worked without stopping. He spent every hour communicating with the Keeper, learning everything he could about the Silence and the plans the precursors had made to fight it. What he discovered filled him with terror. The Silence appeared every 73 million years. It was a cosmic cycle connected to dimensional harmonics, whatever that meant. The precursors had studied this entity for thousands of years, trying desperately to find a way to stop it permanently. They had failed. The best they could do was hide knowledge inside Ark ships and hope that future civilizations would have better tools and ideas to succeed where they had not. There was good news and bad news. The good news was that the Silence could be fought. The Ark ships contained special weapons designed to disrupt dimensional rifts. These rifts were like doorways that the entity used to move between different realities. The bad news was much worse. It required multiple ARC ships working together in coordination. Only 7 ARC ships had ever been built by the precursors, and currently, only one was awake. Taeyong's ship was the only active ARC in the entire galaxy. Viridium Prime appeared in the view screen, like a beautiful jewel floating in space. The capital world was home to the Galactic Council, where representatives from 200 different species made decisions that governed all of known space. Getting an audience with them would be very difficult. Getting them to actually believe his warning would be nearly impossible. 3 days after arriving, Taeyong finally stood before the council. Captain Thesic had insisted he wear formal civilian clothes instead of his greasy mechanic's jumpsuit. He felt uncomfortable in the clean, pressed outfit. The council chamber was massive and intimidating. Holographic representatives from hundreds of species floated in tiered circles high above him, looking down at where he stood alone on the floor. Mechanic Taeyong spoke Counselor Vexith. He was a towering Carthosian with 6 eyes arranged across his broad face. You claim to bring evidence of an existential threat to our civilization. Present your evidence now. Taeyong activated his datapad. Images and data projected onto the chamber's central display for everyone to see. 3 weeks ago, a mining colony at Endera vanished completely. Not destroyed, but vanished. Then a research station at Kelm 7 disappeared the same way. Then the trading hub at Ossus. He highlighted each location on the galactic map with a red mark. These are not pirate attacks or accidents. This is the silence. It is a dimensional predator that feeds on electromagnetic signatures. It eats technology and life itself. Whispers and murmurs rippled through the council chamber like waves. And what is your source for this fantastical claim? Counselor Vexith asked, his 6 eyes all focused on Taeyong with obvious skepticism. A precursor intelligence bonded to my ship, Taeyong explained. It has been dormant for millions of years, waiting for someone who could. This council does not make policy decisions based on human superstition and fantasy. Another counselor interrupted loudly. She was a Valorian like Captain Thesic. Precursor technology is theoretical at best. Most scientists believe it never existed at all. You have shown us some unusual sensor readings, nothing more. This proves nothing. Taeyong felt frustration building inside, his chest like pressure. I can prove everything I am saying. Give me access to your deep space sense array, and I will show you exactly. Request denied, Counselor Vexith said. His tone made it clear the decision was final. This council has more pressing matters to address than chasing shadows and ghost stories. Your warning has been officially noted in our records and dismissed. You are free to leave. The council chamber began to empty. The holographic representatives blinked out one by one. Captain Thesic touched Taeyong's arm sympathetically, but he barely noticed. His mind was already racing ahead, planning his next move. If the council would not listen to warnings, he would have to make them see the truth with their own eyes. Back on the Meridian, Taeyong went straight down to the core chamber. The massive sphere pulsed with gentle light, responding to his presence like it was happy to see him. They will not help us, he said out loud to the keeper. But you told me there are 7 ARC ships total. Where are the other 6? The keeper answered by flooding his mind with coordinates. 6 different locations scattered across the entire galaxy. Each location was hiding a dormant ARC ship, sleeping and waiting just like the Meridian had been waiting. Can we wake them up? Taeyong asked. Yes. The keeper responded in his mind. But it requires a navigator at each site. And the bonding process may not work for everyone. Humans are compatible with our technology, but success is not guaranteed. Some may die trying. We will need volunteers then, Taeyong said. He straightened his shoulders with determination. And we will need to move very fast. How long before the silence reaches the populated areas of space? 3 months, the keeper answered. 90 days. That was all the time they had to wake 6 ancient ships, find 6 compatible navigators who were willing to risk death, and somehow convince the galaxy that the threat was real even though the council had dismissed him. Taeyong smiled, but it was a grim smile without humor. I have worked under worse deadlines before. Let us get started immediately. He began sending messages that same hour. He used every contact he had made during 20 years of repairing ships across the galaxy. He called in favors from old friends. He reached out to mechanics, engineers, and technicians in every sector. He needed people who could think flexibly, people who could improvise under pressure, people who would not give up when faced with something that seemed impossible. He needed humans, and he needed them now. Within 3 weeks, he had found 5 volunteers willing to risk everything. There was Harin, a brilliant young engineer from the outer colonies who had built her own ship from scrap metal and spare parts. There was Bomi, a soft-spoken navigation specialist who had an intuitive, natural understanding of quantum mechanics. There was Yunwu, a former military technician who had served on the dangerous frontier worlds. There was Jia, a systems analyst who had worked with alien technology for 10 years. And there was Seo Jun, a veteran mechanic, who reminded Tae-young of himself 20 years ago. Captain Thesic found the 6th volunteer, a human maintenance technician, named Suho, who worked on Viridium Prime. "This is complete madness," Captain Thesic said as they prepared to split up. Each volunteer traveled to a different ARC ship location. Even if they successfully bond with the ships, there is no guarantee the ancient weapons will actually work against this thing. "Then we improvise and find another way," Tae-young replied with confidence. "That is what humans do best." News of the 4th colony disappearance reached them 2 weeks later. Then the 5th colony vanished just 3 days after that. The silence was accelerating, moving faster than the Keeper predictions had suggested. It was speeding up, consuming worlds more quickly with each passing day. The galaxy was finally starting to notice. Fear was spreading. The bonding process with the other ARC ships turned out to be extremely dangerous. Harin nearly died when her ARC ship's core rejected her first attempt at connection. The ancient sphere had pushed back against her mind, and she collapsed bleeding from her nose and ears. But she was stubborn. She tried again the next day and succeeded, though she spent a week recovering in medical care. Bomi succeeded on her very first try, but the price was high. She fell unconscious for 3 full days while her mind adapted to the massive amount of information flooding into her brain. The doctors monitoring her were not sure she would ever wake up. When she finally opened her eyes, she said she had experienced 1,000 lifetimes in those 3 days. Yunwu's bonding took only minutes, but he screamed the entire time. The pain of connection was so intense that it felt like a skull was splitting open. Jia had to be revived twice when her heart stopped during the process. Seo Jun lost consciousness for 2 days. Suho succeeded, but afterward he could not speak for a week, communicating only through the ship systems. One by one, though, they all succeeded. 6 more ancient ARC ships awakened across the galaxy. Their new navigators began forming the psychic network that the Keeper had designed millions of years ago. It was a web of consciousness connecting all 7 ships and all 7 human minds. Tae-young could feel them now. 6 other consciousnesses linked directly to his through the precursor network. It was overwhelming at first, like hearing 6 conversations happening in his head at the same time. But it was also exhilarating. They were not alone anymore. They were a team. But the silence was almost at the border of civilized space. Time was running out. The Galactic Council finally acknowledged the threat when a major trade hub vanished with 12 million inhabitants. One moment the station was there on all sensors, full of life and activity. The next moment it was simply gone, leaving only empty space. By then, panic was spreading across every populated world. Military fleets mobilized. Evacuation orders were issued for the outer colonies. And Tae-young received an urgent transmission on his private channel. "Mechanic Tae-young," said Counselor Vexith. His 6 eyes now showed something that might have been shame or regret. "The Galactic Council formally requests your assistance in addressing this crisis." "You are a little late with that request," Tae-young replied coldly. "But I am not doing this for you or your council. I am doing this to save lives." He gathered his 6 navigators. They met both physically on his ship and mentally through their shared network. Together, they began coordinating their approach and planning their attack. The silence manifested fully at the edge of the Talmor system. It appeared as a massive void in space, a hole in reality itself that distorted everything around it. Through the enhanced sensors that all the navigators could now access, Taeyong watched it feeding. It was processing electromagnetic energy and converting it into something beyond normal comprehension. Entire planets were being unmade at the quantum level. All ships, form up on my position, Taeyong commanded through the network. His voice echoed in the minds of all 6 other navigators simultaneously. We hit it at the exact same moment with everything we have. The 7 Arc ships moved as one unified force. Their ancient drives pushed them faster than any modern vessel could possibly match. The Keeper guided Taeyong's hands across controls that should not exist, activating weapons that defied every law of conventional physics that humanity understood. The other 6 navigators did the same on their ships. 7 beams of pure dimensional energy lanced out from the Arc ships. They converged on the silence from 7 different angles. The entity reacted immediately. Its form rippled and expanded, growing larger as it tried to absorb the attack. But the precursors had designed these weapons specifically to disrupt dimensional rifts. The beams cut into the silence like knives. Taeyong felt the strain through the psychic network. Harin was struggling desperately to maintain her ship's power output. Her systems were draining faster than they could recharge. Yunwoo's ship was overheating badly. Alarms were screaming on every bridge. They were not going to last much longer. There! I found it. Bomi's voice cut through the network like a bell. I have located the rift signature. The anchor point where it crosses between dimensions. Taeyong saw it instantly through her sensors. A quantum tear in the fabric of space-time itself. It was invisible to normal detection methods, but through the precursor network, it blazed like a beacon of twisted light. All power to weapons immediately, Taeyong commanded. Focus everything on those exact coordinates. Seo, Jun, Harin, I need you both to reinforce the dimensional barriers around that rift. Do not let it escape back through. Suho, Ja, prepare to seal the tear completely once we push it back through to the other side. The improvisation was purely instinctive now. The precursors had given them the tools and the weapons, but it was humans who were figuring out how to use them in ways that were never originally intended. They were breaking all the rules. The combined assault from all 7 ships intensified. The silence writhed and twisted. Its form began compressing as the dimensional rift started to collapse and close. Through the network, Taeyong felt the entity's rage. It was an ancient alien fury of being denied its feast after traveling so far. Now! Do it now! Taeyong shouted. Suho and Ja activated the sealing protocols on their ships. The rift collapsed with a silent explosion of light that lit up the entire system. The silence was severed, cut off from this dimension completely. It was trapped between realities, unable to feed or move. For one long moment, there was only silence. Real silence this time. Then the communication channels lit up with thousands of transmissions. Ships from dozens of different species had been watching from what they thought was a safe distance. Now they all erupted in celebration at once. Taeyong slumped in his command chair, completely exhausted. Through the network, he felt his fellow navigators doing exactly the same thing. They had won, but the cost had been enormous. We actually did it, Harin whispered through the link. Her voice was filled with disbelief. Yes, Taeyong agreed quietly. We did.